Hello everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to our conference. Thank you to Gloucester Hub, is that the right, Heritage Hub, for hosting us for today. You should all know who the TSF are, the traditional song form. If you don't know and want to know, then speak to one of the committee. Richard, sit here, put your hand up, Richard. Richard at the front here, Andy, Peter, myself, Martin, Sean, Jenny. In other words, come and ask if you're interested in joining the TSF if you haven't already. But I think I recognise 90% of you as members anyway. And so therefore you know who I am. I didn't say that. I'm Steve Roud. The idea of this conference came up because I think as we get older, we get more worried about legacy and heritage and archives and that sort of stuff. And I've noticed this in myself, but also in others in our world, that we do get, I suppose, the passing years concentrates the mind, as it were. So people start worrying and thinking about this kind of thing, but also because times in the archive world, the library world and stuff, things have changed, they are changing. And certainly I, as a semi-professional, feel that I'm losing a grip on what is going on. If I ever had a guide, I presumed I had a grip at one point, but now I'm beginning to think, again, that may just be age, or it may be that things really are getting out of control. Or just changing. So why not have a conference to talk about it? And there's 40 of us here. Who'd have thought that we could get 40 people to talk about folk archives on a Saturday morning? Anyways, so it's good to see you all here. Get back to TSF for a moment. Again, if you don't know this, we have a website, we have a newsletter. Our next conference will be in February, 14th February in Sheffield. That's our annual Broadside Day, where we talk about cheap print, broadsides, chapbooks and songs. Excellent day, that is always a good day. And then we have a conference in Manchester. Thank you. Was it 18th of April? Yeah, 18th of April. And that will be on, that's our Women and Folk conference. There'll be a call for papers for that very soon. And we're talking about a conference in Leeds in the autumn to celebrate 100 years since Frank Kitson died. So that'll be on Bookstock in the North, or something like that.
Commemorate,
so
not celebrate.
We have a full programme coming up, as well as our monthly Zoom meetings. The next one will be in November. So that's the TSF bit. The last session for today is called Short Reports. So if anybody wants to just tell us something about what they're doing, or ask a question about vaguely to do with archives or libraries, then please do. If you want to be, if you want to tell us beforehand that you want to say something, then say something to who's doing. Do we know who's doing the last session? Is it Richard or Andy? We don't know yet. It'll be probably Andy. As you can tell, we're as organised as always. Anybody got any questions or comments to make before we start? Because I'm on first and I'm chairing the first section, so you've got me for a while. Hang on a minute. So we are actually 5 minutes early, but that's all right, because I haven't timed it. I don't normally do formal, as you may have noticed, these things. I don't normally do formal papers, but this time I thought I'd write something in advance instead of making it up. So here we go. Apologies. And there's nothing to look at apart from that. So paper is called The State We're In, an analysis of current problems. Now, if you look at the programme and look at the people who are talking and the titles of it, you'll find that we've not just put people in as random or in alphabetical order, as we sometimes do, because we can't get the theme going. There is a theme. Starts off with the misery of my paper, and possibly Catherine's, who's followed me, and then Stephen Miller talking about the problems. By tea time, or just after tea time, we will be so miserable that we'll all just want to go home. Okay. As the day goes on, we will get brighter and better, and by the end of the day, we'll all be cheerful again and out there, and we're fighting the good fights. So don't worry if by lunchtime you're feeling miserable. Okay? So, I'm talking to you today as both a provider, a professional librarian, and a user, somebody on the other end of the process, the end user. As a professional and an enthusiast, I'm talking mainly about England and collections in public rather than private hands. Of course, in our world, especially now, the collections in private hands are very important and still a constant worry, but I'm not really talking about private ones today. The latter, as I say, the private ones are important. In this paper, I'm going to be critical and often negative, but it would be good to start with a positive appreciation of what great things we have had and still have, by expressing gratitude to those who have provided us with our basic resources, which we take for granted until somebody takes them away. Most of the time, it was individuals who made the difference. Malcolm Taylor and his team at the VWML gave us the wonderful, outstanding full English project that we really couldn't do without. Mike Heaney at the Bodleian invented and masterminded the Broadside Ballads site. Again, we have had to do without it. Here's some news for you. The Broadside Ballads site for the Bodleian is due to come back later this month. They say by the end of October it should be back online, publicly available, and still fully searchable, and still with Roud numbers and stuff. In other words, as good, maybe even better as it was before. Thank the Lord. Janet Fargen saw the British Library's Traditional Music for England project into being, and again, once it went, we all realised how important it was. For those of you who don't know, that's been down for some years now because of the cyber attack on the British Library. I don't know if our bit's going to come back or when. I'm still on the positive bit. The staff at VWML consistently continue to make things available, including my indexes. I couldn't do without VWML. The staff at other repositories do the same on a daily basis. You'll be hearing from VWML staff over there later on today, and if you've got any questions or nice things to say to them, please do so. Many of our most exciting resources, Glostrad, Sussex Traditions, John Baxter's Music Hall site, Julia's Bishop's team on Madison Carpenter collection, Devon Traditions, Chris Wardridge in Wiltshire, David Sutcliffe's Sharp's People website, Richard Spencer's Performers, Andy Turner's Kent Traditions, and so on. Sorry if I've left anybody out. But they're all the result of individual dedication, and they're all free of charge. They're all as accessible as people can make them. So we should be grateful for what we've got. But my first worry, and there's going to be several worries, is that when you rely on individuals, there are dangers. They retire, they move, they get promoted, they die on us. And when that happens, their projects become increasingly vulnerable to inertia, neglect, and even, quite frankly, attack and dissolution. I set up the phrase, when we were writing the blurb for this conference, make it safe, make it usable, make it accessible. Now, some of you are professional librarians and archivists. You may disagree with what I'm going to say, but to me, those are the three elements to what I do as a librarian or an archivist. Make it safe, make it usable, make it accessible. I'm going to refer to these as the three makes. Make it this, make it that. Not very elegant, but I hope memorable. They refer to the three areas which make up the world of information provision. Archiving. And by archiving, I'm a librarian, remember, by archiving I include today all repositories of material and information, including libraries, museums and archives per se. As well as the three makes, my theme will be that I have several worries or concerns. I've already mentioned one of those, the reliance on individuals. The makes are not airtight compartments. Making it safe doesn't stop when you save it from the skip or the bonfire, although that's the first most important thing. Safe, make it safe. Make it safe includes putting things in acid-free folders, temperature-controlled environments, making surrogate safety copies, and all the backroom stuff that goes on in an archive or a library. And of course, very important in our field, migrating data from obsolete and fragile formats. Stephen Miller is going to be talking about that later on. This last thing about formats is not as easy as it sounds. I'm quite seriously just an amateur in the audio world, but I have two record turntables, one with 78 RPM speed, 3 reel-to-reel tape recorders, cassette decks, a DAT player, a mini disc player, a VHS machine, a DVD player, and several CD drives and players, various USB sticks and hard drives, all to cope with getting access to previous audio material. You're going to say I should be going on to Spotify or whatever, and no doubt our stuff will be there eventually, but at the moment most of it isn't. And remember that a very short time ago, we were putting things on CD-ROM for, quote, permanent storage, unquote. Good luck with that. So the second make, that was make it safe. Second make, making it usable, includes the sorting, cataloguing, indexing and other processes needed to make sense of the material. Back to that in a minute. The third make, making it accessible, means having somewhere that people can visit to consult material, the archive, the library, making it available on microfilm, remember them, in books, CDs, etc., but increasingly, of course, online. And the work here is digitisation, but not just that, the web design, the search engines, all of that stuff. So my next worry number 2, I think, is that there's major problems in all three areas, all the three makes, but especially now in 2 and 3. So the make it safe isn't so much of a worry anymore, it's the making it usable and accessible. Librarians and archivists are both concerned with making material available to interested users. They do this with their own versions of the three makes. They have different training, different roles, and are like squabbling siblings much of the time. Then there are our cousins, like museum curators and other distant professional relatives. I was trained as a librarian, and I had my reservations about archivists, and vice versa. But now, I'm primarily an indexer, so nobody talks to me. Because, frankly, I want to bend everyone's rules. Because librarians and archivists, as you probably know, they love their rules. But I want to bend them, if not actually break them. All of us are what used to be called information professionals. And my worry number 4, I think I'm up to, is that this role has been handed over willy-nilly to computer developers. Hands up, computer developers in the audience. Okay. They may not like the rest of this. However clever they are, and necessary, they are, and nice people too. They're usually hopeless in dealing with specialist materials and information, because that's not their job. Which brings me to worry number 5, and my contention that specialist subjects, i.e. our folk, not just folk, but folk music, which is part of the folk, and then folk song, which is part of folk music, and some of us are interested in the text and others are interested in the tunes. In other words, we are a specialist area in a specialist subject. So it's my contention that specialist subjects and the specialist materials need specialist handling. At library school, as we called it in the 1980s, we spent most of our time analysing the material, the formats, the subjects, and the users, their levels, their abilities, their needs, and trying to develop systems which matched up the materials and the users. And normally as a librarian, I really start with the users. I start with who wants to find this stuff. Archivists, bless them, generally spend their time trying to fit them all into one template, into an archive template.
Oh, nonsense.
As a librarian. We'll come back to that. Anyway, I do things differently. Both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses, and neither has all the answers. But in the real world, to the users, what the librarians and the archivists do sometimes seem to be working against the user's interest, because we're thinking about other things. We're thinking about the collector, the masses of the collection. We're thinking about the materials. All good things, but they don't necessarily match up with what the users want. But it's our job to match those things. The real world is against us in many ways. Repositories are expensive to run and rarely provide any direct income for their overarching organisation. There are problems of staffing, finance, accommodation, server space, system management, overhaul, and so on. And this means that the information people at the bottom of the food chain, if you like, the librarians and the archivists, rarely call the shots. Vital decisions are often made by those further up the chain who have the least knowledge of our field, and are often based on conventional assumptions. Nobody reads books anymore. I'm told that every day. We don't need specialist systems. AI will sort it out. I'm told that twice a day. And so on. But the people who say those things are the ones who control the money and the resources. Except in a dedicated repository like the VWML, our material is rarely high priority, and even the professionals involved will rarely have the expertise in our particular field. Why would they in a large organisation? The bigger the institution, the less likely they are, the professionals, to be able or willing to meet our specific needs. Donating our material to the British Library, for example, made perfect sense from a make it safe point of view. But we have been severely disappointed in the other two makes, the usability and the accessibility. Come back to that in a moment. It's not difficult to see why, and if I was in charge of those institutions, those big institutions, I'd be making the same decisions, some of them anyway, as have been made. Take the Bodleian, for example. They have dozens of different online facilities, each the bright idea of someone on staff a couple of decades ago, each with a different approach, different protocols, platforms, search engines, etc. It's unsustainable, uneconomic, and a manager's nightmare. And I must admit, It's the logical conclusion of the librarian's fondness for tailor-made solutions. In other words, if you do it all the same, it's not right, but if you do it all differently, it's not right either. So again, it's our job to sort out this professional mess, if you like. When reality bites, our materials get lost. As at the Bodleian, for example, we're very fortunate, as I just announced, that Alex Franklin, who was the original cataloguer on the broadside balance scheme, she's still on staff at the Bodleian. And Mike Heaney, because he was big white chief of the Bodleian, is now retired but still has a bit of clout. In other words, because we had a couple of individuals who were interested, then the site's coming back and it hasn't been dumbed down. If we hadn't had those people in place, I would like to bet a week's pension, which of course isn't much, on the fact that either it wouldn't have come back or it would have come back in a dumbed down way. Get onto that in a minute. So getting on to make number 2, we've just done 1 and 3, I'm not quite sure why, but we're now making 2, making it usable. So cataloguing is not an exact science. It's time consuming, it requires mastery of rules and conventions, and requires, I maintain, a knowledge of the subject and the likely users. Bad or inadequate cataloguing can make or break makes number 2 and 3. In other words, the usability and the accessibility. Or, there's nobody here in the British Library, I can whack them as much as I like today. On the British Library site, for example, inconsistencies abounded. Now, if I can't check these things because the site's been down for 2 years, is it now? 3. If I remember rightly, the Blacksaw ship was described in at least 8 different ways in the catalogue. Blacksaw ship, ship at Blacksaw, the ship, a pub in Suffolk. That's filed under A.
I've got one.
Yeah. This matters. It matters for searching because you don't know what, if you search for Blacksaw, you're going to get half of them and not the others. If you search for ship, you're not only going to get all the ships, but anyway, don't get me on that. It matters for searching, but also because they displayed their results in alphabetical order of place. After you've done your search, what you get was a list of the places. So the Blacksaw ship was all over the shop, everywhere. A failure to understand nuances of our material results in another problem. Many tracks of the Sussex singer George Belton came up, this is the British Library again, came up when you searched for London because he was recorded in a London folk club. Mm-hmm. If you searched for Sussex, he didn't come up. So, the Beatles didn't come from Liverpool anymore, they came from London because they recorded in Abbey Road. In other words, our material is not where the thing was recorded necessarily, it's where the person came from that matters to us. That's a very simple fact, but if you don't know our material, if you're used to using other music material, like jazz for instance, where they're obsessed with where things were recorded, different rules apply for different types of material. Even in the specialist field of music librarianship, different approaches are necessary. If you're cataloguing, say, classical music as opposed to folk, a template for classical music will be different for folk. So not only is it music librarians who trip up if they suddenly have to operate in the folk world. Not just librarians trip up, but it's also music librarians. In this scenario, our material is usually the victim rather than the victor. I've never met anybody who's tried to fit classical music into a folk template. It's always the other way round. Our stuff, and I'm not claiming to be the victim here, it's just the way things are. Our stuff is normally the victim. Okay, but the biggest worry, I've lost track of how many worries I've had, but this is the first biggest is that both librarians and archivists usually fail, all of us, including myself, for perfectly valid practical reasons to go deep enough in their cataloguing. If I have a book in my old days as local studies librarian on photographs of Gloucester, I catalogue the book. I don't list all the photos individually. I don't have time. I can't spend all day cataloguing one book. If an archivist has a tape of 25 songs, we're lucky if they list all the titles in the description field. Often they don't list them at all, they just go down to tape. Now I'm not talking about specialist archivists here, I'm talking about general ones. Listing them all in one field is unhelpful because it means that other information in the all-important, what I call a data set, can't be included. 90%, says in brackets here, and it's true, I made that figure up, but it's broadly true, of users in our world 90% want information at that lowest level, at the level of the song, the singer, the place. In other words, what I call the 4 W's. So you have the 3 makes, several worries, and the 4 W's. Can I give you a test of this? The 4 W's are who, what, where, when. Because that's mainly what we're asking about with the song. There's 2 more, but one of them's not W. There's how and why. But stick to 4 for the moment. Who, what, where, when. That's the data set we're working for, and we want things individually and in combination. In other words, we don't just want what. We don't normally just want the song. We want the song in Hampshire or in Ireland. Or we want the song sung by female singers. In other words, it's a set of data facets. I think that's the proper word. So if you lump all your titles into a description field, you can't put that information for each individual title, let alone Roud numbers and child numbers and other kinds of metadata. In other words, you have to go down in our world, in archives, library catalogues, you have to go down to the individual item level, because that's what our people want. Which is why I'm an indexer. Because indexers start from the bottom. They start from the item and work their way up as to what collection it's in and where you find it and stuff, as opposed to, as I used to do as a librarian, start at the top and work my way down. This is why indexes are crucial. It's why I'm an indexer. Incidentally, I thought I was the only one arguing on these lines, but my recent experience at University College Dublin has shown me that some folklore archivists have been struggling with this for some time, decades in fact. As Ukrainian-Canadian archivist Marina Chernyavsky, I apologise to Marina if that's wrong, she's Ukrainian-Canadian, she says in an article, the kind of questions that folklorists ask require folklore archivists to describe folklore collections by subject in addition to their creators, which is the usual practice for libraries rather than archives. Librarians are obsessed with subjects. Since folklorists often study variation depending on locality, folklore material must be indexed with geographic terms. In other words, where does the singer come from? Where does the song come from? These provide more efficient access to folklore collections and improve their discoverability. So what she's doing there is she's saying that the 4 W's, the who, what, where, when, are essential for our kind of archive. She mentioned also song subject index. I should mention Martin's here, who's in charge of the excellent subject index project at Vaughan Williams Library. Okay, nearly finished. In make number 3, accessibility, we're talking mainly about search engines. The ability to find what you're looking for, which brings me to my second biggest worry, dumbing down. It's always dumbing down. We don't even have a clear word for the opposite. Nothing ever gets clevered up or smarted up. It just doesn't happen, you know. Well, even before the cyber attack, the British Library had all but wiped out its advanced search facility. And it wasn't very good in the first place. They've replaced it with a simplistic, simple search which does not allow any serious research queries. It doesn't allow you to search by the 4 W's, either in combination or single. The Keystone Richest site in Scotland, Scottish School of Scottish Studies recordings, did exactly the same. The BL changed their referencing overnight so that all the links from everywhere, including my indexes, were broken. Other sites have done the same. It's not difficult to do it a better way. Several people in this room have had direct experience of how difficult it is to get developers to even contemplate anything more complicated than a simple search engine. In the guise of making things more modern, intuitive, accessible, non-academic, all laudable goals on paper, what we get is Google-style search box and a bunch of filters which rarely, and I mean never, are what we need for proper inquiry. The really annoying thing is that it's always presented as an either-or situation. I have no objection to a simple, clean website with Google-style search box. I would use it on a daily basis. But I want an advanced search button as well. Take me, and a few others like me, to an area where more complex research can be carried out. There's nothing new about this. The principles of database construction, multi-field searching, Boolean operators, all that kind of stuff, were sorted out 40, 50 years ago. It's not rocket science if the rocket has already been invented. You don't have to do anything but buy an advanced search, basically. Anyway. Lastly, and this is beyond our control really, because these decisions are made at a higher level, we very rarely have notice of pending changes until it's too late. The British Library, we knew they were redoing their websites. Certainly nobody asked me what to do. I don't know anybody else who was asked what to do. They just did it. It was just announced, and there it was. And even if they had asked us, our little bit, the traditional English project, which started off with such promise 10, 15 years ago, and we've relied on ever since, it's such a small part of the British Library site that we would have no say, really, in what goes for the rest of the site. I mean, why would we? They can't do everything for every little user group like us. Which gets me back to indexing. What can be done apart from whinging? But I mean, whinging has its place. We cathartic analysis and all that. What can be done? Support what we've got. Use it or lose it. Every site that's under threat, if 1,000 people a day have been using it, then it's got more chance of surviving than if 3 people a day have been using it. So go on the sites and use them. Support the professionals who are working on our behalf. Join the EFDSS, or whatever it's called. Because if you're a member, then you have a say in what happens if the VWM is ever under threat. Anybody here who's not a member has no say in it. All they can do is whinge. If you're a member, then you can vote. It's the journal is under threat. In other words, if our part of the world is ever under threat, it's the members who can do something about it. So put your money where your mouth is. Same goes for other institutions. Join them and have a say. If you have material of your own, make sure you have a survival strategy in place. Make sure it's in your will. Make sure that somebody else knows that it's in the cupboard or in the shed or whatever. When I get home, I will write my will. But this one's important. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Now, nowhere is guaranteed safe or guaranteed to honour the three makes, because things change. So don't even, the British Library. We all put our stuff there because it's, it's the big, it's going to be there forever. Well, it might not be. Look at what's happening in America. Don't necessarily, so spread your stuff around. I don't necessarily mean splitting up collections, although sometimes that is what should be done with your collection. I have a good friend that most of you know, Reg Hall. He has a wonderful collection of Irish music. He has a wonderful collection of English music. He has a wonderful collection of jazz. 500 LPs. So, Vaughan Williams may well want the English. Itmar in Ireland may well want the Irish. But do they want 500 jazz LPs as well? No. So, splitting up collections is sometimes the answer, but ask a professional, don't just make it up in your head. But if you're dealing with sound material, make a copy. Digitise it, get it digitised, make a copy and put it in more than one place. The Bodleian went down, and so for a year or whatever it's been months actually, we've not had access to that wonderful site. If they'd asked us beforehand, and if they'd been willing to lend us their images, all of the Bodleian stuff was indexed in my index. So we could have cobbled together, with the Vaughan Williams' help, because they've got the online presence, we could have cobbled together the images and my index and kept some kind of access. The British Library is the same. Most of the British Library collections are already in my index. So if they have been willing to give us their the images, or even put them up on some site, anywhere would do for a contemporary thing, then we could have had something going for that time. In other words, joined up thinking. But we don't have that kind of power. They're not listening to me. The Bodleian are because of my Roud numbers, but the British Library, there's no reason why they should come and talk to me, in my back room in Somerset. So the answer to a certain extent is in our hands as users. Volunteer to index things. Make indexes, make them available. Make your stuff safe by putting it in more than one place. So we can do something about it. And if you know any of the professionals who are working on our behalf, then as I say right at the beginning, support them, be nice to them. And in other words, we have to function as our own field, as our own discipline, as a college, whatever the words are. I can't think of the right word. Anyway, so I started off miserable, I end up miserable, because things are not looking good at the moment, but things could get better. AI will sort it out. I'm still here because I'm chairing the first session. We've got going to give you 5 minutes for quick questions or comments, and then we're on to Catherine. That's right, Catherine. I know that's Martin. Hello, Martin.
Just a little comment is on you're saying make copies of things. There was
Yes.
once a research project in America which had my favourite title, which was LOCKS, which stands for Lots of Copies Keep Stuff Safe. And I think there's
yes, that's
brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant title for a project. And I think that has been slightly borne out by the fact that although lots of things disappeared when the British Library site went down, one of the things that has reappeared is the English short title catalogue,
yes.
because that was part of a wider project, and it has come up courtesy of whatever it is, the Consortium of European Research Libraries. You know, so the fact that it wasn't all in one basket meant that resource is now still
Yes.
available.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good example. But it also shows that it needs people in that kind of position that can make that kind of difference. You know, because the users of the short title catalogue, I mean, there's more of them than us, but also they are in positions that we don't normally reach. But in our world, it's the same thing. Yes, you're right. Some of it is in our hands if we think about it, joined up thinking. Catherine.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for your talk. The variety of sound recording devices that you use at home to try and preserve stuff that's now obsolete, recording styles or CD-ROMs or wherever they are. Reel to reel, when I come from radio background, and when I started in radio, it was reel to reel tape, which very quickly changed. But do you have access to anywhere that does reel to reel? It's very hard to find anywhere in Dublin where you can get reel to reel tapes digitized or whatever, without expense. I mean,
Without this huge expense, yes. There are people, I mean, amongst ourselves, there are people in this room who do have the setup to do it, and I can do it up to a point. I mean, I can't clean up the machine, the recordings, but I can just do a straight copy, as it were, normally. So again, I think the answer is between ourselves. We've got to start asking, who can do this, who can do that. Yeah. I mean, anybody volunteering?
I've got a question.
Oh, another question. But yes, I think that's a good example of the fact that we do have to do it ourselves. Yeah.
Can I just interject that we're in the process of revamping our reel-to-reel players, and we'll be able to digitise reel-to-reels at some point fairly soon. One of them is currently in Southend being overhauled by an expert.
But they like the 5 that are in my loft.
But yeah, so we will be able to, but I can't tell you exactly when.
Right, that's good to know. Yes.
That's a great talk. Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Just a couple of comments. I think, as regards to your comments on making things safe and saying there's not so much issues there, I think you do that at your peril.
Right.
Because as digital things go down, we need to make sure the originals are preserved, and
Yes.
that's an expensive thing. We also have an additional. We have to ensure that the digital thing, the digitised files are made safe as well, and that's an additional burden. And just with regard to your fundamental elements, 2 of them are the same as mine, but I always say fundamental elements of an archive are collecting, preserving and make available. So you've got to get that material into the archive in the first place, and that's an important side, especially when you're talking mainly about public collections. And just finally to say that in my 40 odd years as an archivist, I've never put anything into a template.
Okay. I'll scrub that bit then. But I don't believe you. Fine, thank you. Peter.
Yeah, I think you may have sort of covered this, but I think there's an issue with technical upgrades as well. You can make things accessible online, but then hosts have a habit of updating software and suddenly things don't work anymore.
Yes.
or you have to change hosts and then someone's got to do the migration. I've done this about 7 or 8 times with my own thing, so I know what it's like. And you find younger people,
There are
don't-
one or two young people.
you don't want to bother with the migration side of things, and you often the dumbing down sometimes arises at that point. But,
Yeah, I
certainly,
agree with you.
and to a degree that's happened with the full English, that the new interface doesn't necessarily have everything that the old interface has.
It
And-
should do,
Yeah,
but it's very difficult to migrate things onto a new system.
I know.
And it takes
Yeah.
longer than we've had to make it perfect.
Yeah.
So
I
bear
mean-
with us.
I mean, there is a tendency for developers to say, oh, well, I can't be bothered with transferring this program. I'll do a new one altogether.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's where you
it's-
lose things.
It's often technology-led,
Yeah.
the problem. But to be fair, it is also the developers who don't want to, because they're in a world of innovation, they're in a world of making things better and changing them, whereas we're in a world of keeping things as they are. If we go back to 1903, that would serve us fine. So, yeah, there is tension there. But again, if we're not aware of that problem, then it happens when we're not looking. You know, British Library, as I say, just the links are just gone before we had a chance to say, what about my links?
Yeah.
Martin, did you have a last
Yeah.
question?
2 bugbears. First is, it annoys me immensely that it is no longer possible to read some of the earliest versions of Word files that I have. That is particularly useful.
We're going to be talking about
It
that.
can be recovered, but my big thing is hard drives, external hard drives. I don't know how many I've got. I'm pretty manic about backing up, and I've had lots of increasing sizing hard drives over the years, many of which, the older ones, no longer actually connect or work. But last year I bought a big 8 terabyte RAID drive that was supposed to be the answer to life, the universe, and absolutely everything.
Yeah, but CD-ROMs for the answer to it.
Yeah, and it failed within 6 months and had to go away for recovery.
Okay.
Its replacement failed a couple of months ago after another 4 months. So I don't know whether I can rely on that technology at all. So hard drives, they really need to do some work on that, but the answer is to back it up in several different places.
Different places. Okay. Yeah.
I
I think we're
forget
going
the
to move
word.
on, because otherwise Catherine.
Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here and see familiar faces and some new faces. I hope to meet some of you later on and chat about broadsides and music hall and early tabards and all sorts of things. And current tabards as well, if you've got any recommendations. So my paper today, or my talk really, I suppose, is called Not Found, There's a Hole in the Ballad Archive. So a hole in the ballad, as you probably know, once described the effect of wear and tear and singing and handling on broadside ballad slips or sheets, where constant use rubbed away sometimes words and sometimes whole, sometimes paper, as you can see in some of these. Actually quite hard to find holes in ballads online, surprisingly. Here's a couple of them. Where some of the words and some of the things have been rubbed away. I think it looks like a burn hole in the one over there. So really today I was kind of thinking of posing some questions that perhaps we can solve as a community, and Steve I think has talked about that a little bit as well, such as how we should deal with things like link rot, for example, when a revamped digital collection makes obsolete the references that we have used in the past in published research. And the other thing is, I'm really just looking at a kind of a personal overview of the archives I've used in Ireland, the ballad archives, looking at sometimes how alterations to cataloguing, for instance in the John Davis White collection at Trinity College Dublin, have led to alterations to cataloguing and then disappearance of online access, as in the case of the Colin O'Loughlin collection at University College Dublin, where Steve just spent some time, and also temporary inaccessibility of some of the materials we have, such as at the National Library of Ireland. And all of these have created challenges not only for access, but for ensuring that ballads we've referenced in published research can be found by those who are reading our work into the future. I'm going to begin at UCD, which has been my most recent alma mater, where I did my postdoctoral research recently. There are two main locations in University College Dublin which are of interest for ballad scholars. Special collections in the James Joyce Library is one of them, and then the National Folklore Collection, or the dubious site as it's called. I'll talk more about that in a while. Steve, as I said, has been over with both of these collections recently, adding the songs there to the Roud Index, and actually I've had my first contribution also to the Roud Index. I've provided a little spreadsheet of one collection there, so I'm very proud to be part of that. So Special Collections has various volumes of broadside ballads, including the Colm O'Loughlin collection. This is Colm over here. He's a wonderful Irish scholar, printer, who invented an Irish print font, and a general Renaissance man in Ireland. His collection consists of this kind of uncut ballad sheets. There's a series of them. I think there's about a dozen of them altogether. Until February, these were online at UCD and extremely useful to use. As you probably know, certainly in Ireland, it's quite unusual to find these uncut ballad sheets. Almost always when you see ballad collections, they're cut up into the individual ballads. So it's unusual to find them. I think it was unique to find them online in the Colm O'Loughlin collection. And there are various things that make this very useful for a ballad scholar. For example, they might have a printer address somewhere on the sheet, which you can then use to identify that printer, and the woodcuts also you can identify. And in fact, there is a printer here, as you can see beside the number 12 here, and it's John F. Nugent and Co. And also usefully gives the address, which is 35 New Row West, Dublin. Now, this also helps us to date this broadsheet because John F. Nugent's a very well-known ballad printer in Dublin, but he mostly was at Cook Street, just around the corner from New Row West, in the 1850s and up to the turn of the 1860s. But we know that he was at New Row West in 1865 and 1866. So that's extremely useful for dating all of these ballads on the sheet, and in general that applies to a lot of these uncut ballad sheets in the collection. So you can get some decent information which you wouldn't get if you see these ballads cut up separately. So this collection was taken offline in February this year, along with many other digital resources at UCD, due to worries about the vulnerability of such collections as an entry point for hackers. The worries were prompted not just by the British Library hacking, which I think put fear into the hearts of librarians across the world, but also by the hacking at home in Ireland of the Irish Health Service, the HSE website, which compromised patient records in May 2021, and which also caused a lot of Irish institutions to look at their own. I mean, obviously, patient health records are a serious data breach if they get out. But it did get other institutions which might not have quite such personal information to worry about their holdings. So I spoke to the former Special Collections librarian at UCD, Evelyn Flanagan, who is now the Director of Cultural Heritage there at the university, about what had prompted the disappearance of the online collections. And she sent me the text at the time, which is very recently but has now changed, on the temporary digital library site, which explained the reasoning. So following a review of the UCD Digital Library, we identified a system vulnerability, took the difficult decision to retire the aging infrastructure and focus our energies on its replacement, along with the introduction of a new digital preservation system. So that all sounds good. We're working on creating a new and robust permanent digital infrastructure for our digital collections. So that's what the problem is and what's happened at the moment. And I also asked Dr. Flanagan if there was anything we could do to get our stuff back. So she said, in the case of UCD, if you send in a request to access any of the collections that have been taken down, they'll either send you JPEGs of the images, or if there's a few requests for the same thing, they'll make it available on the temporary digital library site. So basically, if you want it back, let them know in general, as it may help to prioritise certain collections over others to be restored both to the temporary current site and the permanent digital libraries when they come back online. So hopefully this will encourage people to to campaign and to send queries, including to the British Library, as you said, Steve, and to places like UCD, to get stuff that we want back and let them know that we do want it. I think that is important, that we use our voice. And there's a little bit more about using our voice here as well. So here is the temporary site at the moment. And as you can see, there's a user survey. I'll come back to that, and that's really interesting, I think, and is a little bit different than what's happened at the British Library and places like that. They're not asking you what you want, but here they are asking you what you want. Now, whether they will take notice of that, or it's just a nice little PR exercise, I don't know, but it looks good at the moment. So here's the site, as you can see, and you can also see the hot topics here: streets, architecture, buildings, construction industry, and maps. The reason for that is, as I look deeper into the site, is because those are the things that they put up on the site. It's not because they're the most popular things in the world, although maps are a hugely interesting and popular subject to look up. Old Irish maps and old Dublin maps, or whatever parts of the country. They are they're very well used, I think. But you know, they're not. So my ambition is to put ballads in here, but when I looked at ballads, as you can see, there's another the whole of the archive. No results found in the ballads. That's because it's the temporary site and they haven't put anything up there yet. So I'm hoping to have a small campaign to get a few ballads up there and have ballads in big bold letters down there. So here is the survey on the home page, and if anybody wants to look for it, the easiest thing is digital.ucd.ie is where you find this survey. Now, it's a short and sweet survey. So the first two questions, I don't know if you can see them very well over there, but they're about access and discovery and ease of use. Other topics are functionality, content, accessibility, engagement and use in teaching and research, future needs, and final thoughts. So there's just 8 questions altogether, and they seem to be well thought out. So I've given you the address. If you could fill in the survey, that would be really helpful. Mention Colin O'Loughlin and other valid access. Maybe the uncut broadsheets will magically appear. One of the things about the broadsheets is that when I went to look for them, having realised they weren't on the UCD website, and just to put one up for you this morning, I realised they were not to be found anywhere, which I thought was really amazing that nobody else had put up one of those uncut broadsheets on any other website. They were just at UCD, and I was lucky. I remember that I had given a paper in the Collectomania conference, and I used Colin O'Loughlin as one of my collectors. So I went back and looked at that presentation, and I found I had the uncut broadsheet used as a picture there. So that's why I had it. And it just shows you, yes, we may all have things that people want. And, you know, if you'd asked me, did I have that, I don't know if I would have known. That's my bad collecting, my bad cataloguing, my own bad cataloguing, but I did remember where it was eventually, so that was good. But anyway, so there's an option, let's see, is this the right slide? Yes, so in the survey there's an option to include details of good collections you've used, like good accessible collections. And I think that's very hopeful. I do have hope that this is something that they will take notice of. Now, as I said, maybe it's just PR, but I think it's interesting that they're looking to see what have you found useful in digital collections, and you know, maybe you'll tell us those and put them in your final thoughts in the survey. So I just think, you know, that's another like useful information gathering exercise they're doing, and hopefully they're going to do something about it. So the other collection at UCD, where Steve was buried in the vaults, is the National Folklore Collection, which has not been affected in the same way by the digital shutdown. So this library consists of many elements, but two of the most important ones are the manuscripts collection, which were recorded by folklorists around Ireland in the late 40s and the 1950s, and the schools collection, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. Both collections are available on the dedicated website dubious.ie, which you see down here. Dubious is the Irish for heritage, as opposed to docus, which is the Irish for hope. But as a ballad scholar, I think we're interested in keeping both of those things alive, heritage and hope at all times. Here is a page from the schools collection, which I have used quite a lot in my research, but particularly songs like this, the Rakish Paudí Rua. So this collection is a wonderful resource of local stories, superstitions, poems and songs, which were collected by school children in primary schools from their parents, grandparents and local elders all around the country in the 1930s. So these were mostly recorded by the school teachers then when the children brought them in, and written out in these with their beautiful school teacher handwriting in books, in manuscript books. They provide an absolutely fascinating archive of local folklore at the time. And as somebody was mentioning about the different variations, the variations which are very important in folk songs, local variations in folk songs and also folk stories. So you get a lot of that in this collection. So these have all been digitized over the past decade or so, and they've just finished the voluntary transcribing from 2015 to 2025 of like 450,000 pages of these manuscripts. So this is the kind of transcription people have been doing from the handwriting into this kind of thing. You can volunteer to do it. They had like, I think, over 90,000 pages in the Irish language and the rest, so 360,000 in the English language. So that was the schools collection. They're now doing the manuscripts collection. They've done about 10% of that overall, I think, or 10 to 15%. So, and they're looking for volunteers. So if you feel you'd like to transcribe some old, nice handwriting like this into these, you can just register on the website, dubious.ie, and start doing a little bit of work. Obviously, this is also open to mistakes, because people make mistakes when they're reading, including here. So yes, I made some little small notes, of course, on my page. So I'll have to, squint at my own writing here. Anyway, one of the things is, Steve often talks about your first lines and titles, and there's always a lot of variation in those. But there's a particular problem, I think, with, and I probably also get this with Welsh English and Scottish English songs and stories, is that the transcription or anglicization of Irish names even can have a huge amount of variety. So for instance, Paudine here, so the Rakish Paudí Rua, now Paudine is an Irish name and it's not spelled like this in Irish, but in English it sometimes has a H after the D, it sometimes has an I father or one E or something else, and Rua, which means red-haired in Irish, this is kind of a more Irish spelling of it here, but you would often have it as R-U-A, or you would have the collie Rue or U-E, or you would sometimes have even other ones which I'll explain in a minute. So there's a huge variety of titles possibly here. And this song, which I know because from my research, while I was looking up this song, is that it's attributed to one of the people I've studied in Ireland as a Dublin tavern singer and songwriter, James Carney. And this song is attributed to James Carney. I did give a paper on James Carney to the Traditional Song Forum, I think 2 years ago in Sheffield. So I was interested in this song when I found it in the archive here. The song that came out on the broadsheet by James Carney, or allegedly by James Carney, is called The Raking Paudí Brew. So it's R-I-K-I-N'. Here it's The Rakish Paudí Brew. And sometimes it's The Rakes of Paudí Brew. So it's, with that title, you're going to have a lot of trouble. There's none of those words are stable, except the. And that's really not much help. So all three words in the title are or variable. And, you know, so those are safely in the archive. It's also not easy to find necessarily unless you do a lot of, you know, wildcard searching. Here, just to show you a little bit of the problems that creep in here, I've got, I turn my back completely to the county Donegal, which is there, but obviously because it looks like a kind of a loopy C there, it's changed to the bounty Donegal by the transcriber. And also, you can't quite see it there, but thus began the rabbles of the rakish Pauline rule rather than the rambles. Now, maybe neither of those are kind of fatal errors, but they are errors that might create difficulties for you finding those songs if you're using particular words to find them. You can send in corrections, but I thought I'd hold off till after the conference. But I will send in the corrections for those. So I think I've covered those. Right. So there's one other thing about this song, and it also shows that we learn a lot from each other. You know, we can't just be in archives looking, because we're going to miss things because we don't know. Now, somebody else might have said, "Oh, I found that song in the archive," and I'll say, "Oh, I didn't see it there. That's because I didn't have the right spelling." But I assume this song was in a broadside of 1860, and I found it here. I was amazed that it had survived on, because it was recorded in the 1930s by somebody presumably whose grandmother or something had sung it, or great grandmother, and they were singing it on. I didn't realise it had survived in the singing tradition in Ireland up through the 1930s and beyond. But in fact, the song was recorded by an Irish tenor called Joseph Maguire, who was extremely popular at the time. And his version of the song is called "The Rakes of Paddy Row." Now, Paddy Row is a more anglicisation, or a further anglicisation of Paudine. Paudine in Irish means little Patrick, or Paddy, I suppose you could say, and Rua is red. But as I said, there's Rue, there's various ways of transcribing that, or transliterating it into English. But Row, I hadn't really thought about, and the Rakes of Paddy Row, well, you're just not going to find that song with those words, really. So the first line is relatively stable. Here it's "after breakfast one fine day," and the broadsheet has "'twas after breakfast one fine day," so it's not exactly, you know, the same, and it's, you know, it still presents some problems, perhaps. But as I said, it was John Molden that told me that he'd heard the record when he was a young boy. I'm sure some of you know of John Molden. Here's a wonderful ballad scholar in Ireland, and he told me that he sang the song. He sang the song because he remembered it from listening to the record as a young boy. And so I was really charmed by that. And I found the song, the record. It's supposed to be in the Irish Traditional Music Archive, but they had a record of it, but they didn't seem to have the recording of it. But I did find that it was in New York, in the NYU library, and I managed, because I was visiting my sister there, to go and hear it at Christmas last year. And it was really wonderful to hear it. Now, I couldn't record it myself. They didn't allow you to take a recording of it. But at least I got to hear John Maguire singing it, or Joseph Maguire singing it in 1930, and that was a wonderful breakthrough for me to hear the song. So I suppose it just shows you we need a lot of help sometimes to get through. We need a lot of help to get the songs, to access the songs. It's not just looking them up and knowing they're there. It's also all the different variations that go to, you know, helping you find it. I'll just quickly go through another couple of things. The John Davis White collection, which I've used extensively, or sometimes the Cashel Ballad collection at Trinity, kind of between 900 and 1,000 songs that he bought in Cashel in County Tipperary between the 1840s and 1890 or so. The problem with this collection for me is that here's one of the songs I've used in a broadside paper I gave, I think it was in 2019, at Broadside Day, about nuns in broadside ballads. So that's one of the songs I used. It's from the Cashel collection. Nice little woodcut there too. So this Cashel collection comes in 3 volumes. And I just put the nunnery bill on there because it was such a boring slide otherwise, because it just has these little things on the side. And the numbers of them, if you can see them. So one of the volumes is OLSX 532, numbers 1 to something or other, OLXX 1531, and then OLX 1530. But none of them says this is volume 1, which it does say on the shelf, this is volume 2, which it does say on the shelf, and this is volume 3. So it's really like, why do they do that? Why do they not put the number on them that lets you know volume 1 or volume 2? So it's really kind of annoying to me that they didn't do that. So as I said, if you know, you know. So I know that this bottom one is volume 1 and going up to volume 3 at the top, but who knows that? You know, it's just like, what were you thinking, librarians? Come on. Here's where Trinity is long gone from the website, but this is in 2020 when they told you about the changes that they were making on their wonderful website, the new digital website, which is going to happen now in UCD. You can still access all the old stuff on the old website you see at the time, so you could go back and look and find your things. But now, of course, that old website is gone, it's all gone onto the new website, and you can't get those old numbers anymore. I went back to check that I wasn't mistaken and they hadn't changed the numbers, but they have changed the numbers, because I wrote to the librarian in Trinity at the time to say, can I use some of these for the publication by the ballot partners? And I used the digital numbers that they had on the website at the time. Now this ballot has changed, so as you can see, this is all one number. It's joined together with a sort of hyphens and a little underscore. But now it's got hyphens, but it's got no underscore. It just says number 164. So the volume is an entity, but the number is just, you can't click on this and get anything, whereas you used to be able to click on this and get something, get the song. Now you click on this and you just get the volumes. You have to look for the song separately. It's just annoying and frustrating, especially if you've used this in your research before, and now the number is not there. And as you know, the joy of looking at these digital links is that you click on it and then you get to the ballot. Whereas, you know, it still seems kind of quite miraculous when it happens sometimes now, because they're usually not there. Something's gone wrong. Just get on to my next page here. So down Larry's Music Hall, this lovely, beautiful picture here. This is another, this is the front page of a programme from Dan Larry's Music Hall, which is now the Olympia Theatre on Dame Street in Dublin. And it was a wonderful crossover. Started as a music tavern, little music taverns where my friend James Carney used to sing, and then became this wonderful music hall, and it's now still a beautiful theatre. Dan Larry was very well known. He was an Irish man, but he also had a music hall, notably in Liverpool, I think in a few other places too, the Malakoff, I think it was called, in Liverpool. So I found out from, I think, the National Library catalogue, that in this programme there is a song by James Carney, because Dan Larry was one of his kind of users, or one of his promoters, and so I could see that in the catalogue the name of the song, it's called The Riches of Ireland, and I was able to find that song, or that title, is on a few broadsides, so I wanted to make sure that that was the same song, but I didn't have access to this programme because the National Library was having it changed to its manuscripts and ephemera area, and so everything was in boxes and you couldn't get to them for the last couple of years. I managed to get the cover because a friend of mine had the cover for another reason, not because they were interested in the songs, because they were interested in theatre. So I was able to have the cover as a nice picture, but I didn't have the ballad. And this is also the case with a portrait of one of my other subjects, Joseph Souther, who was a street ballad singer, a street poet in Dublin around the 1850s. I had a portrait of him, which I discovered, it's actually online, it was available online, sorry, I could come out here and look at it, I didn't put it in my slide, but I think I'll leave it for the minute, because we're probably short of time. So I wanted to look, though, even though it was digitized, I wanted to look at the actual portrait and see, what's around it, is there a back to it, all that kind of information. So I couldn't get them for the last couple of years, and it was kind of frustrating. But when I looked up both of these things earlier this week, just to check in before I was prepared for the talk, they'd both been restored to access. So now they've reopened that section, but I didn't know that. And I don't know how I would have known that. It just magically reappeared without any information. Just when I went to look in the catalogue, I see, yes, I can go in there and look at them now. And I'm going to do that next week, but it's sort of, I have to let go of that grudge now. It's maybe put it back on. Now, so just to finish off, this is a beautiful book plate. We happen to have an American book from the 20s at home. Maybe a study of book plates, I don't know if they're enough poor and shabby enough to be used in Broadside Day sometime, but they are a wonderful study. The reason I use it today is because it shows somebody alone in their wonderful library. And during COVID, when I couldn't access libraries, and even since then, other scholars have shared with me, very generously shared with me, their resources. So I got broadsheets from the Poets Box, I got transcriptions from the British Library catalogue, which was offline, which helped you to find stuff in the British Library actually in real life. And even the Cashel Ballads collection, I got the whole collection from somebody. So I don't want to name those people in case they get inundated with requests for things, but I wonder if there's some way in which we can, more formally share the resources we have among ourselves in the TSF. And really, I don't know whether that is on some kind of a spreadsheet or by the series of secret handshakes in the Sonic Society type thing, but whatever, it would be great to know what people have. And I think Steve did kind of refer to know what people have and be able to share it would be great. So really that's just a few points of discussion, I suppose, today on the challenges of digital libraries, and perhaps we can explore more ideas and maybe even find some solutions over the rest of the day and during the breaks. Thank you for listening.
That was great, thank you, Catherine. We are running late, but we do have time for some questions if we cut our tea break a little bit short. One of the things I was going to say is that I spend half my time downloading things because I think this site's going to disappear, or I'd rather have it archived. So maybe the answer is to, if the site allows you to, or if it lets you do it, then download everything so that you've got it at home.
Yeah. Well, now I've learned that, Steve. See, I didn't know that
No, I
before.
didn't know that before.
And they were gone offline.
Any other?
I was purely going to say that, yeah, I mean, I dare say Steve Garden has done that and printed out the entire Bodleian collection. But I mean, that's an awful lot of ballads, isn't it? And what tends to happen is you look for something in particular. I'm looking for a ballad, broadside of Cupid's Garden, and then you might download it. But preemptively downloading the whole lot is.
It's only 30,000. Come on, people. But yes, you're right. If you don't know you're going to need it, until you know you need it, sort of thing. Yes.
Yeah, in terms of the link grot issue, and I appreciate a lot of the material people are working with is in what I might call the deep web. They're in special databases, but the web archive sometimes is helpful for some of these things. If you've got a particular link, maybe with some of your values, you might find they're on the web archive.
I think sometimes I find you can't go very far into them.
That's a problem with.
So they might have the main pages, and sometimes it's harder to get deeper into them on the web archive. I'm not sure, but I think that's been my experience occasionally.
Totally agree, but sometimes it's worth the punt.
Yeah, definitely.
Try, yes. Yes. Is the web archive the same as the Wayback Machine?
Yes.
I think it's similar.
Right, yeah.
So tea and coffee.
Tea and coffee, yes. A quick tea break, ladies and gentlemen. Get the tea.